5 or 6 pickup loads of old televisions, old computers, old printers, wires. I even found a complete set of Windows 95 floppy disks upstairs, which are now in some recycling center somewhere. Good.
All that stuff, we have major business. It all goes here.
We've been thinking specifically, because of Thanksgiving month, about gratitude this month. Concentrating on gratitude as a quality of life rather than an act that we perform. So I want to say this again. In the stories of Jesus, his gratitude to God for bread, for his disciples, for opportunities that present themselves, his gratitude to the woman who pours perfume over his feet, or to the Roman soldier or the woman who break through the crowds, break through cultural barriers to get near to this Jesus, to get near to him. Jesus' gratitude for these various things his gratitude is the soil from which kindness, his brand of kindness, then grows. He is so grateful for the role that God has for him. He is so grateful to his disciples for following and responding to his invitation to follow him. He's so grateful for those things that he dies a death he didn't need to die. He could have, at the very end, he could have skedaddled to Babylon and spent the rest of his life counting gold and wives. But he was too gracious, too kind to Christ to do that. Love God and love your neighbor, he said. Both God and your neighbor complete you. Feel the gratitude and act accordingly. This formula, and I hate to reduce it to a formula, but it is one of those things which can be called a formula. This formula, gratitude, then kindness, is really one of the foundational, one of the basic parts of the kingdom of heaven on earth. One of the impediments we have, one of the sets of blinders which we have on as 21st century Americans, is that we have deeply cultural ways of understanding how the world works. Our systems of education or economics are based on a philosophy of progress, moving from here to there somewhere. First grade, second grade, third grade, high school, college, further training, etc. Or we earn money, we save money, we invest money, we earn some more, we save some more, invest some more, and then retire. Movement. I'm not grading the system, I'm just defining it here now. Because we have to be aware that Jesus was speaking from a different system, a different philosophy. And if we can understand something more than we do now about that philosophical, spiritual basis he was speaking from, we can have another of those aha moments which causes new light to enter our minds and our hearts and our souls. I am the light of the world, Jesus said. Jesus doesn't think, nor did he speak as a typical American, as the people down the street or the people we work with. The parable in chapter 13 of Matthew makes that clear. All the parables in chapter 13 make that clear, but in them he talks about the kingdom of heaven. He never describes it in detail. There's no list of characteristics. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's how you get there. Here's a map. He just keeps giving us these images of what it looks like, or what it will look like. And among them is Matthew 13, verses 31 and 32, the parable of the mustard seed. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven, he said, is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds. But when it has grown to the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, then the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. The mustard seed is very small and insignificant. There was a contemporary of Jesus in Rome, Pliny the Elder, he was named. He was a historian. He was a naturalist in Rome, and he wrote at that time a book called, a really thick book called Natural History. And in that book, Pliny described all the plants that were known in the Mediterranean world. He says only two things about the mustard plant, though. It's medicinal, so it does have some value. But he said not to plant it because it tends to take over the whole garden. It is a weed that can't be stopped. Now, those two things would have been the images that Jesus had to build on regarding mustard. He would have been describing this in a way that he was saying, I had this for you, and it's therapeutic, what I've been describing. It's life, it's healing, it's medicinal, but it's like a weed. It's kind of a shocking image. He says, I'm planting a weed in the world. I'm going to talk about strange things like nonviolence and sacrifice and living a simple life. But they're planted, and they're going to take over. The old world is over. I don't know if it's going to take 2,000 years or 4,000 years, he might have been thinking, before you get the point, but I've planted what I know is eternal truth in this world, and it's going to take over. But there's also opposition. There's the birds. Now, we think of birds. I think of the birds. I saw the first cardinal the other day. Or right now, the nuthatch, and some of the small birds are coming fairly regular. But we might, picture all birds that way. Nice little birds coming by, our little friends outside. Won't that be nice? But birds to any farmer are an enemy. They're a negative image. They eat up all the seeds. Birds are the enemy. They strip corn ears before it's time. They ruin crops in many cases. Farmers don't want birds in their fields. So Jesus is saying, I'm planting something that's like a weed, a therapeutic one, but a weed nonetheless. It's going to grow with great difficulty because there's going to be all kinds of opposition, but it will prevail. It will finally, eventually, take over the whole garden. That's Jesus' hope, but do you see what a patient hope that is? He didn't see it happen in his lifetime by any means. And remember, from the beginning, Jesus proclaimed his kingdom, what he saw as being real, in a world where 98% of the people were poor. They were all of them except for the Romans and occupied people. The vast majority of them were enslaved to some degree. Religion was highly corrupt. And still in the midst of all of that, he dared to announce the present reign of God. He dared to say, you can live this new reality that is coming. You can live it right now. And that's amazing. The word for living that way, for living in those in-between times, is faith. gratitude born of faith. Faith in the always present, always coming kingdom of God. That kind of gratitude becomes a health-giving weed within the culture. In the Roman world where power reigned above all, Jesus was envisioning a world where love reigned. You are in the world, but not of the world, Jesus said. So we live simultaneously in both worlds, the world of power, but we are planting weeds of love, gratitude, kindness. And here's how that sort of thing plays out. Here's what happens to weeds growing in the garden. A couple of weeks ago, Keith came in the back door. I was out there in the hallway and said there's a guy out there whose car is broken down and he needs gas money to get him and his 2 dogs to his mother's funeral in Monroe, Louisiana. And, you know, God forgive me, but that little image just kind of made me initially laugh a little bit, getting these dogs to Mom's funeral. So I went out and talked to him, and my approach with anybody the first time, I tried to the very best of my ability, I tried to stifle David Weber's ego, judgmentalism, etc., at least a little bit, and try to approach everybody who comes for something with the attitude that we see Jesus showing all the time. He didn't ask anybody to jump through hoops. You know, tell me the Heidelberg Catechism. Get down on your knees. And he didn't make anybody do that kind of stuff. He said, here, touch, give. So I talked to this fellow, and he was, you know, about that high, wearing sweat clothes, was kind of scruffy looking, and told me about the dogs in the car waiting. His car had run out of gas over by the Baptist church. He thought he had enough maybe to get to a gas station. So I said, you know, meet me over there at the gas station in front of Kroger. I asked him what he was driving. He was driving a black something. So I took off in my car because I needed gas very much that day, and so I thought I'd get my gas filled while he was there. I did drive over there and pulled in the front bank, the front area there for the gas, and filled it up and waited, and then finally a black truck came in behind me there. I was immediately struck with, man, this is a pretty nice truck for this guy to be driving. But I went back and took my card and put it through the credit card feeder and punched in my zip code and all that, and then pointed to the gas tank because it needed to be opened from the inside. I couldn't do it from the outside. And the guy rolls down the window just as the gas cover pops open, and he says, I can't believe this. And I said to myself, I can't believe it either because it wasn't the guy. It was a guy, kind of scruffy looking, but then he got out of the car, and he was dressed as good as the truck looked. He had, you know, some bling hanging around his neck, and he says, "I just can't believe it. I've never seen anything like this. And I know it's happening. I know it's happening because I've heard of it happening, but wow." And so I said, "Okay, yeah, I'm just going to put $20 in." I kind of knew that this wasn't working out the way it was supposed to, but I didn't want to do anything to destroy his joy at it happening. So I went ahead and I put the $20 in, and he was just standing there just over and over again, and he finally says, "Man, can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Sure." And I pulled away and just watched him. So he got on the phone before he left, and I don't know who he was calling, but he was excited and moved. And I said, you know, he asked, what do I do now? And I just said, you know, about paying it forward, and you'll have the chance at some point, sometime, to pass the favor on. Well, I waited for a while, and the other guy still didn't come, so I finally drove back to the church, and he was walking. He couldn't get the car started. He was walking out here. So I was able to give him some money, just some cash, because he was going to go over and buy a gas can and get some gas enough to take it back over here. It's a weed. It's a weed that started here at the communion rail. You know, that's the fertilizer on that weed seed that had been planted 2,000 years ago by Jesus, who was giving that same way. All of us were involved in the spreading of that weed through our offerings, our gifts, what we put here on the communion rail. And now that weed's spreading again in a nice black truck somewhere. And the seed thrower now is dressed very nicely, wearing some bling, but he is a seed thrower now. Weeds, Jesus weeds. You don't know where they're going to pop up. We only need to know that they will. So spread seeds and never stop spreading them. We are building a kingdom of heaven to come in a kingdom of heaven that is already here. Amen.